Got something, Malcolm? You good? Okay. Kind of to sum all this up in a nutshell is kind of what he placed on my heart. I kind of was struggling this week. It was the first week back to school and everything was going on, and I got a little bit time was a little bit not managed well on my end, and I got here this morning and it was a great service, and I came up here at the end with a young man who life had hit him kind of in the mouth, for lack of better terms, just hit him in the mouth. He knew where he needed to go to get answers, and he knew that he had accepted Christ, and he knew that he was in a good spot, but he was just a little bit beat and a little bit battered. He was a little bit tired. We all get that way. We all get a little bit beat down. We all get a little bit battered. All right. But I looked up to that young man that came up here and he knew. He said, I don't know what's going on. He said, but he said, the Lord's dealing with me. I said, all right, we'll figure it out. So he came up here and he took care of some things. But it kind of got me to thinking. And I think Brother Tim actually said something about it kind of in the middle. Um, Kind of talking about running. Like whenever you get closer to a finish line, it's easier to run hard. It's easier to pick up. It's easier to find a little bit more wind in the lungs. All right. I was a runner in high school and I was a good long distance runner. I was better. I won't say good. I was better at long distance than I was short distance. You put me in one of them races where you had to come out of the blocks and run as hard as you can, as fast as you can. I wasn't going to do any good. I'd probably be the last one, to be honest with you. Yeah. I was not a sprinter. I was not. But you put me in a 5K or a cross country race, I could hold my own there a little bit. I wasn't first, but I certainly wasn't last. I was above probably the upper third, and I was competing then, and it was easier for me to compete there than I knew that if I ran a sprint race where I was going to come out of the blocks and somebody had already blown by me and I was just going to run last. It's not easy to compete. But as I was thinking about that this morning, and I looked at the Parkersburg homecoming was this week, and I thought back about 11 years ago, I ran a half marathon. I ran a half marathon because that's what my college cross country coach said we needed to do. I'm going to be honest with y'all. I didn't train well enough going into that half marathon to be in where I needed to be. And as the race started, all right, now there's a purpose to all of this. When the race started, I was running with my college teammates. I was a freshman, Ramona, that had never broke 18 minutes in a 5K. I was running side by side with a two-time state champ from Richwood, West Virginia. And quickly I realized that I could keep up with him for 2 miles. Yep. I mean, I'm step for step with him. I'm coming out of the gates hot, and I'm just running. I'm pumping my arms. I'm not looking around. Quickly I realized my lungs were starting to hurt a little bit. My body was starting to slow down. And they took off from me a little bit. And as they took off from me a little bit, I had to watch them at a distance. And I'm like, as long as I can keep them in sight, I will be okay. And I will run a good race. Well, I got to the 2 mile mark, and that's about the time they started pulling away. And it was under 10 minutes. I said, we are moving at a pace way too quick for this old boy. All right. I was running between 6:30 and 7-minute miles. That was the race that I could run. That was the race that I felt comfortable. When I looked over and I seen that we'd come through at under 2 different miles were at 5 minutes or below, I realized we had a problem. And I looked over and I at that point it went from a competition to where I was doing good to survival real quick. I realized real quick that this body was pushed past its limits and I hadn't trained for it. And if I would have probably spent a little bit more time in the summer running and following that running log that my coach gave me, I would have been a little bit more successful in that race. Okay. And I got to thinking about that as everybody was posting their times and stuff. My goal was to finish under 2 hours. I did that at like a minute or an hour and 56 minutes, but I could have ran a lot better. I could have absolutely been at about an hour and 45 minutes if I would have stayed on my pace. I did not stay on my pace. All right. Think about our walk with Christianity. Whenever you first get saved, whenever you first come into this thing, or whenever you walk into a new calling, think about how hot you come out of those blocks. Oh, yeah. Think about how fast, how many lives you're going to save, how good everything is. But then when things get hard, we realize maybe we hadn't put in the work, or maybe we hadn't trained, or maybe our body wasn't ready for what we're called. God will not call you to something that you are not ready for. Okay? God will not call you into a calling and give you everything either. There is a fine line between being spoon-fed and doing it yourself. There's a fine line. Yes. We oftentimes love being called. It's like, God, enlarge my territory. He says, all right, go do this. We're like, all right, God, I'm going to go do this. We get about 3 steps into it. And we say, all right, God, let's do it. He said, I called you to do it. I sent you. You are prepared, but you might have to put in a little bit more work. You might have to study just a little bit harder. You might have to read a little bit more. Things might have to get shuffled on your agenda to where this is a priority. Okay? Running a half marathon wasn't a priority to me in June and July. But when it came the first weekend or second weekend in August, and I'm about the 8 mile mark, I realized it should have been a priority because I still had 5 more miles to go, and this old boy stopped sweating. So I knew that we were in trouble. I knew that I was not prepared for where my body was at. Okay? A lot of us walk into things, and kind of what he told me is we need to catch our stride. Whenever you are a distance runner, your stride is everything. You can, if you watch the people on the Olympics, all right, you watch how they take off. Their stride is constant, consistent. I ran with a girl who was a lot better than me in high school. She was from St. Mary's, and her coach would have a stopwatch, and if she hit the 1 mile mark, he'd tell you if she's going to PR or not. If she was 3 seconds too quick at the first mile mark, he said, well, she ain't gonna run a good race. 3 seconds meant that much to that young lady that was running. He could tell if she was on her stride or if she had fallen off or if she was going too fast. Okay? How many times have we rushed into things? We know that God has put this person in our life to deal with it, but we don't quite build the relationship up high enough, and we are just run right at him and say, you need Jesus. They do need Jesus. Yeah. Everybody needs Jesus, okay? We know that. But it's a tack. It's kind of building up the relationship. It's the journey that goes from point A to point B that oftentimes we lose sight of because we just want results. In today's world, if you work in a business, you are just a number to that business, but the minute you make a sale, they'll tell you you're important for about that long, and then they're going to say, what have you done for me lately? Okay? We live in a world where it's hurry up and do more. You're only as much as what you've done for me this week, right? So as we go into this thing with God, that's not what he wants us to do at all. You look at this, people would get mad at him whenever he was teaching and doing the parables. People would get mad at him because of people he was hanging around. Why do you think he always draws towards the sinner and the lost? The Sermon on the Mount, he said, there's sheep without shepherd. What are we doing? We have got to put ourselves in those situations. Oftentimes, we look at it as, let's sprint in, save their day, tell them that God loves them, and sprint out before anybody sees us stealing them. Before anybody sees us talking to them. Because I don't want, what if they think I'm doing what they're doing? Yeah. What if they see my truck at that location? Everybody knows what they talk about at that location. We worry about our self-appearance instead of going to the places where Jesus would oftentimes be himself. He would go and sit with them and just sup with them a little bit. We were like, oh, let's pump our brakes, sprint in, sprint out, instead of staying side to side with them long enough to help them get out of a tough situation. But I'm going to read a couple scriptures. This one kind of dealt with a little bit of what we were talking about earlier and how the world's a mess and it's a train wreck, and we know that things are... Anytime you know something bad's going to happen, you can't look away because you know that there's something going to happen. We're at a place where all eyes are on us. All eyes are on everything that's going to happen. It's just, when's it going to happen? When's it going to drop? It's almost like you're at a firework and you're waiting for the POW to go off, or you're waiting for the first one to go. Yeah. Sometimes they go off and you didn't realize it was time yet. They scare you to death. Yeah. Sometimes you're prepared and you're just sitting there waiting forever and your ears are plugged. You never know. Like we are at that point where things could go off tonight. It could be another 6 years, 60 years, who knows? Yeah. It could be another 85 years, Ramona. I had to apologize to Ramona. I kept saying she was 84, but she's 85. Oh. I told her she was going backwards in age, not forwards. So, but in James chapter 2, verse 14, I'm going to read a little bit here. What doeth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith and have not works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things which are needful to the body, what doeth profit? So if you sit there and you see somebody that is struggling in your life, and then you tell everybody how much faith and how much you do for God, but you don't help the people that are standing directly in front of you, that's what James is talking about here. It's what it says, you got to help the ones that come into our path, not just say we help them. Even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. Yea, a man may say, Thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show you thee my I will show thee my faith by my works. Thou believest that there is one God, that doest well. The devils also believe and tremble. But wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? Was not Abraham our father justified by his works when he had offered Isaac his son upon the altar? Okay, I'm going to stop there for a second. Think about this, okay? Think about just the joy that was in Abraham's life there for a small second. Okay, we read in chapter 21 about the birth of Isaac. We read about him and Sarah just being all kinds of excited. Listen, Isaac's been kind of placed on my heart a lot lately, just because Brinley's going to be 3 weeks old this week. But having a new baby in the house, it makes me think about the Abraham and Isaac story. It makes me think about that walk up that mountain. It makes me think a little bit harder about how real that was. This isn't made up. This happened, okay? He took little old Isaac. You think about it. Abraham, he was in it. He wasn't sprinting. He was stride for stride with what God told him to do. He had found his stride. And as he was going up that mountain, I don't think he changed. I don't think he wavered. As that boy looked around, he started to question. He started to think. He said, Dad, where's the sacrifice? Abraham didn't break stride. Remember, he said, God will provide the sacrifice. And they got up there, and as things were going down, and Isaac, once again, starting to understand things are going on in his life, he's starting to understand that things are way off here. What are you doing, Dad? Whoa, let's pump the brakes. Abraham kept running. Listen, there's things. You want to break me? Let one of my girls be hurt. You want to break me? Let something happen to one of my girls. That would break me. This Abraham is absolutely taking him, knowing what he was called to do, beyond a shadow of a doubt. He didn't bat an eye. He didn't turn around. He didn't question. He said, Yes, Lord. I'll go. As he took Isaac up there, and as he laid him down, and Isaac says, Dad, there's a ram in the bush. Imagine. He didn't break stride. He knew God would provide. He didn't know how. God didn't tell him the end from the beginning. He just told him, do this, this, and this. Abraham said, Yes, I'll go. And as he did that, think about the joy. One chapter before, finally getting his son. So now laying his son down, laying his Isaac down. How easy it would have been to try to find a way out of it, Lord. How easy it would have been to justify, God, you just gave me this blessing. You can't take it away yet. It's not okay. But his obedience, his mind that just constantly followed God and said, I'm with you step for step. I'm not backing up now. I'm not going to get tired. I'm not going to grow weary. I'm going to do this, Lord. And he laid Isaac down. The story wraps up there. But think about just Abraham in general. The times he went, he did things time and time again for other people. But this time, he was asked to give his son. He was trying to spare other people earlier in Genesis. Now he's like, I'm going to take my son. It's hard. She's 3 weeks old. I would go crazy to save my kids. I absolutely would go crazy to save my kids. But to watch that faith, the faith Abraham had that said, no, God's going to provide. That's the same God that we serve today. All right, there's going to be hard times. We all know. We talked about it. There's going to be things that stretch us thin. There's going to be things that no matter what you prepare, you may not be fully prepared. And you're going because if we were fully prepared, we wouldn't have to rely on God, right? If we knew everything, if we had everything stored up, if we knew the end from the beginning, we wouldn't have to worry about the faith. He's wanting a faithful, obedient generation to rise up now more than ever. He's wanting us to go and tell people, listen, if you're a follower of God, forget the loss for a minute. If you're a follower of God, it's time to start showing it. It's time to start doing what it's talking about here in James. It's time to show that this is our fruit. This is what we believe. This is where we are at. Not just a word service. The world is filled with lip service. You can hear. Take this drug, you'll lose 30 pounds by next week. Take this and you'll put your money in this timeshare or put your money in this investment and you'll be rich in 6 months. Listen, they'll take your money any way you want it. It's easy for a Christian to just kind of pipe out a word and say, oh, God will take care of that. Just give him time. You got to show them. If you're walking around an absolute train wreck, why in the world would anybody want to look at you for advice? I wouldn't go to somebody that has no money to ask for advice on money, right? You wouldn't do it. We're at a point where people are looking at us and we're saying good things on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday evening. How we live in Monday through Saturday, whenever the lights are off in the church, whenever the camera's not rolling and I'm not preaching, what am I saying? As a basketball coach, I oftentimes tell people that champions, if you want to call them that, or whatever you want to call them, winners, aren't made just under the bright lights of a competition. It's the hours and hours and hours of time they put in a closed gym where there's no eyes. The same thing with a Christian. If we don't spend time in our Bible, we don't spend time in a prayer closet, if we don't spend time praising the Lord, how are people supposed to look at us and see that we have things a little bit different? That we're a little bit, maybe we're not the same of the world. We're not called to be the same of the world. We're called to be a peculiar people that is a little bit different, that people can look at and say, this guy's got something that I want. If we don't have that, what are we doing? What are we out here doing? Punching a time clock isn't going to move the needle anymore. People are truly looking for answers. People are looking for what side to choose, what team to be on. Just as simple. Today is more so today than it ever has. I think it was Becky that talked about her childhood. Listen, my girls will see things that I didn't have to 20 years ago. When they hit their teenage years, it's going to be a completely different world than what it was for me in the early 2010 era there, around there. But they're going to see things completely different. They're going to look to us to how to navigate these things. I can't give advice to them because it wasn't around when I was there. Remember, it wasn't there when I was there, Cheryl. I have to look at how and continue to read what the Bible tells me. That things are going to get tough. That rights are going to be called wrongs, and wrongs are going to be called rights, and that there's going to be a time where Christ is no longer wanted, and it's going to come a time where He says enough's enough. All those conversations are not fun. They're not fun to have with your kid who, I mean, we all think about it. We all wait for the trumpet to sound. We're all mature enough to know that that's coming someday. And then there was a time, even in my early 20s, I'm like, God, don't do it yet. Not yet. Yeah. I still got stuff I want to do. Yeah. I still got a life to live. Just time out. Yeah. Give me to my 40s. Just let me live. Yeah. Now I'm like, okay, this is fun. Let's go. Let me out. Yeah. Like I'm at that point where if it's tomorrow, great. Yeah. Listen, I will honestly tell you this. As we walked off the basketball floor in our regional championship game this past year, I looked at Abby when we got home and I said, that might be the last basketball game I ever coached. Not that I was going to hang it up, not that anything like that, but it was the fact that who knows if the Lord will tarry that long. We're at a point where who knows when He's coming back. Things are getting ugly. We know that. Yes. So we shouldn't take any conversation for granted. We shouldn't take anything for granted. We shouldn't take a church service for granted. This morning, God showed me a young man back there that was just struggling. He was torn side to side. And I asked his buddy, I said, well, is he okay? And he's like, I said, okay. So I just walked up and sat beside him. That's all it took. And he came up here, and Tim was able to pour into him. I was able to pour into him. But there was a young man that if God wouldn't have shown me that he was struggling, he would have left here with that same struggle inside. And he might have waited till another church service. He may have found a way to cover it up this week without needing somebody to help him pray. That's where we're at, churches. We can't take things for granted. This marathon that we have lived, this marathon that has been what we have called our life. Remember, this is 85. Mine's going to be 30. We have all different times. It's not a sprint. It's to keep our stride. It's to keep step for step. Abraham showed us, even when it's difficult, that's going to cost you your own son. You have got to pay attention and you have got to go in because God is calling us to do it. There's not a person on this world that I would listen to nearly as much as God. including Abby. We've got to find out whose voice truly matters. We've got to find out what truly matters at this time. Whenever I told her that statement about not coaching another basketball game, that hurt me to say. I enjoy it, not just because of the competition of the game, but it's the locker room, and it's the getting to pour into young people, and it's the people that look to us for advice, and it's the people that will come back and talk to you whenever you're out, and it's like, man, you made such a difference. That's what it's about. Absolutely. It's not about just winning and losing. Winning is great, losing is terrible. We all know that. All right? Yep. Let's take it a step farther. If you don't have Jesus Christ in your life today, you're not winning, so therefore you're losing. And if you're losing, therefore you're going to be with the devil, because he loses time and time again. All right? We'll throw that in there. Make sure you got Jesus in your heart. That's step one. Then you can start doing this other stuff. You can start reaching your family. You can start showing people that there's a change in you, because that's what it's ultimately about. And I joked earlier about taking off out of the blocks as a newly saved Christian or a newly called Christian. If we would keep that energy the whole time. But we're a generation that likes to get bored. My little brother this summer, I don't know how many times I told him, he said, Bub, we come play, we go do this, we go do that. I'm bored. I'm like, I am about to lose my mind on you. Go find something to not be bored and leave me alone. But oftentimes, do we not get a little bit stale in our walk? Oh, yeah. When God hasn't given us a new mission because we haven't completed our last mission, but we got tired of the last mission, so we're just kind of sitting here, and it's like, come on, God. And God's like, you haven't done what you're supposed to do. You're like, come on, God, that's boring. I don't want to do that. Give me something new. Yeah. That's what we don't need to get bored now more than ever. We got to look. If you are at a spot where you're not really progressing where you want to, look around on what God has called you to do. Make sure that your mission is complete. We are not a taskless society, but you know what? God does give us all objectives. God gives us objectives to do and to go and talk to and give people a little bit of encouragement. If not, all of us wouldn't be sitting here. There's somebody in your life that has said something to you along your journey that has made you think, I need what he's talking about. I need what she's talking about. I need what she's singing about. Every one of us has had that moment where it's like, it's me. He's talking to me today. Yeah. We might get a little selfish here for a moment, but he's talking to me. That's kind of where we got to keep our eyes, not just worry about getting from point A to point B as quick as we can, because we forget the journey. But don't worry about the time that it takes, but enjoy the journey that you're on. Enjoy the tasks that you're accomplishing. Enjoy the relationships you are building, because it just might mean everything to somebody. I'm going to flip over to 1 Corinthians. Gail, as I'm flipping over there, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I wish you brought that tambourine to the old birth there the other day. It helped lighten the mood a little bit. You start playing that tambourine out the porch window. Whenever Abby was having that baby, that helped us all out. Calmed us all down a little bit. Yeah. I'll tell you this, Anna Lee absolutely loves it when Gail grabs that tambourine. He came back here with big eyes and was so excited because Gail was up here singing. I tell you what, it blessed her heart. I know that. Verse 24 in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? Yep. So run that ye may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate. In all things now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air, but I keep under my body and I bring it unto subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. We are all in this race to get to heaven. We are all there. Okay, we all sack races in elementary school, foot races at the PE day, or if you were in track or whatever it is. Every one of us has raced the race down here, and we thought it was a big deal. I can remember back to the high school days, we had an LKC meet in Ritchie County, or Doddridge County, and the top 24 places got a medal. And as you're running, people are counting. They're trying to tell you where you are. I can tell you that is the only race that I ever puked after, Ramona, because I wanted that one a little bit more, because I knew that I was on the bubble. I knew that I could get a medal. And I knew that I could be considered all conference, second team, albeit, but I could get a medal that made me feel important. Yeah. So I pumped a little harder. I ran my body to where I literally crossed the finish line, puked, and then got in line to get my results. Yeah. To me, it was worth it. Yeah. Looking back, my goodness, was that dumb? I said, man, my body was tired. I was done. That's how exhausted we need to be now. It's not easy. Being a follower is not easy. Think about whenever Peter broke out, whenever he got out of jail and he took off running and he ran to those gates. That stride that he had, he was excited. But he wasn't just worried about him at that moment. He said, go tell the others. Go and tell them that I've gotten free. Whenever Paul and Silas were sitting on the bottom of that boat, it wasn't an easy time, but they found their stride. They knew that they needed to praise and worship, that was the only thing that was going to get them out of the situation that they were in. They knew that everything had come down to this, and this was going to be it for them. They started praising and worshiping. Chains fell. People are in a place where they're bound, and they don't know why, and they can't figure out what will set them free. They might have money in the bank account. They might have food in the freezer, but they just need a little bit more, and they don't understand what it is. And there's a void. That void is Jesus. That void is the love of Jesus Christ. Whenever he went to the garden to pray, and the disciples fell asleep on him, they weren't in stride right then. He had told them what was going to happen time and time again. They should have had their ears up, paying attention, almost like a watchdog mentality. Instead, you watch all these movies, and the old sheriff's dog is the heavy one that lays down on the porch with their ears laid down. They're sleeping. That's what was going on. They had no idea. And Jesus came out and said, "Could you not just stay awake for me? Could you not just pray a little bit for me?" And he would go, but he went back and prayed. Prayed so hard he sweat blood. At that moment, he knew what was about to come. He knew that his finish line was in sight. He knew that this was the time that if God could make it pass, make it pass. But if not, I'm going to finish this race with all I've got. Absolutely, buddy. And he went to that cross. He went through that beating. He went with the thorns pressed in. He didn't waver one time. He was in stride for you and I. Absolutely, buddy. He stayed right where he needed to. He carried that cross. Went through anything beyond anybody's imagination for you and I. Amen. Because Adam lost his stride way back when. Yes. Jesus carried that cross, stayed in stride with what the Father had, the Father's plan for you and I. How selfless. The thought of a man, JB mentioned this morning, a man. He wasn't some supernatural. He took man forward. Yeah. And he went and was about his Father's business. Went and gave the ultimate sacrifice. Knowing that it was going to be hard. But he approached that step for step. The same way he did whenever he healed the woman with the issue of blood. He never wavered. Whenever everybody was yelling and stop screaming, don't bother him, don't bother him. He knew what he was about. His stride was exactly where it needed to be. Time and time again, he shows us to love people, to put others ahead of yourself. And in 2024, that's rare. It's on almost the flip side. I ain't going to help Ramona unless I get a kickback. That's the world we live in. Yeah. Ramona, I'd help you without a kickback. You know that. But that's the world we live in. Is people weren't going to, if you can't scratch my back, I ain't going to scratch yours. That leads to hard feelings. It leads to resentment. It leads to a lot of things that the enemy's going to use against you, and none of it comes out of love. Not a single thing of it comes out of love. Luke 1, we go all the way back with Jesus and John. Whenever Mary walked in with Elizabeth and the leap in the womb, that was when the stride started. We know right then they knew things were different. They knew something was just taking place. They couldn't put their finger on it, but they knew something had started. Zechariah took a little longer because he He's a male. I mean, I'm not going to say I wouldn't be him, but that's how it works out. It just took him a little bit longer. But I think about that, and I think about where we are today in the world that we live in. And I think about how many things we put priorities on. How many things we will drop everything and run out and do. Or we will run out and go and make sure, listen, first day of bow season, we'll make sure we're in that tree stand before daylight. Unless something bad happens, we're going to be in that tree stand. First football game, we'll make sure we're there. A lot of things that we take that God has blessed us to be able to do, and it's great things, but the priority cannot be there.
Absolutely, buddy.
Our priority has to start with Jesus Christ, our Father in heaven. We have to start there. We have to make sure that we're step for step with Him in everything we're doing. Because if we get our eyes off and we start looking at things, listen, I told you this week I didn't put the time in that I needed to, and He held me accountable on that. He called me out this morning, and I thank Him for that because I needed it. This message, I need it just as much as anyone. And sometimes that's how He reaches me, Ramona, is He's like, go tell them this. And I'll be reading, and I'll be like, oh, this is good. This is good. And I'll be like, hey, God, this is getting pretty personal, Lord. Can we change the subject?
Yeah.
He said, no, you're going to preach this. And I'm like, I'll preach it. But I'm also going to listen. I'm going to take it and I'm going to apply it because that's what we're called to do. And in a time where there's so much worry, there's so much angst in the world, there's so much just complete and total chaos. Just chaos. Now is the time that we need to train. I told you I wasn't ready for that half marathon. Are we ready to handle the world that's out there? We truly talked about it. Are we read up? Have we prayed up? Have we linked up with like-minded people who would help us in a situation where if things do go south, we can absolutely turn to them? That's what we have got to do. It's more than just saying we're ready. Listen, because if we just say we're ready, listen, the enemy will come against you in a major way. He doesn't always play fair. He doesn't always do things the nice way because he's evil. We have been given a manual. We have been given a playbook of what's going to happen. Everybody on the news, everybody's talking about how things are going to look bad, and all these countries are rising up, and nuclear this and nuclear that, and it's almost to the point where it's nauseating to listen to. Because I have 3 young girls, and I'm like, my goodness, the world we live in is awful. It's straight up awful. But understand, the world that we live in was created by our Father in heaven, who is absolutely amazing.
Yes.
The one who started this thing, and He knows when the end date's going to be. He knows when He's going to tell Jesus to say, go get them. They've had enough. I've had enough. We're done. Everybody wants to look at statistics and look at all these things, and bad things started happening in this year, and then it was directly correlated to this law, and this happened because of this. Look, whenever we started turning away from God, is when things started getting bad in this country. Whenever we were God-fearing, people looked at God, prayed to God, understood who God was, and followed His commandments, followed His playbook here, followed His word, things were pretty good. Now we've got people who want to rewrite everything, who think this is hogwash and that's hogwash. Listen, I'm telling you, look around. Look at the mess that has been created because we said, God, take a back seat. Give me a land that will put God first. Give me a country that will turn back to God, that will put God in school, put God in state buildings, put God wherever He wants to go, He ought to be able to go. He gave us the lungs or the air in our lungs this morning to wake up. We ought to praise Him. He gave us the ability to walk today. We ought to go and tell somebody about it. He gives us the ability to come together on a Sunday morning and a Sunday night. We ought to be able to open these windows up and let everybody in up and down this road here. There should be that much joy in this place. That's how much praise should be in this place. We should be so beaming when we leave this place. People will be like, where did you come from? But then they'll take a look and tell somebody who's in a tanning bed because they're burnt. When we leave church, can somebody see that there's a joy in us? That there's a radiant light that is coming out of us? Thank you, Lord. That's what we need to be doing at this point more than any. And it's not me preaching at you, because it's me too. Put a mirror up back there, let me preach it myself. But that's what God has told me. That's what God has led me to read. That's what God has told me to believe right now is go. Find your stride. Listen to the voices that matter. The ones that don't give them the time of day. Don't let somebody don't let somebody come into your house and try to steal your joy. Because it ultimately don't matter. Listen, there's going to be days that it rains on your parade. There's going to be those days. There's going to be hard days. I preached on it last Sunday, though. God never changes. It's going to be the same. The problem is whenever those rainy days start stacking up, and we think we can handle it on our own, and we don't go back to our prayer closet, we don't go to the Bible, we don't look for the joy that He has put in our heart, we don't look for the things that He has blessed us with, and whenever we start looking at all the obstacles, and we start looking at all the negatives, and we don't look at our blessings, then the enemy's even got you even farther. Listen, I can have an absolutely horrible day at school or coaching, whatever it may be, but I'll come home and I'll have one of those little girls yell daddy and run up and hug me. And it changes my mentality just like that. We have a Father in heaven whose arms are wide open. Whenever you have a rough day, we don't have to wait till we get home to get a hug from my daughter to feel better. We don't have to wait until we get home to our dog that runs up to us. We don't have to wait. We can run to our Father in heaven's arms and say, Father, man, this is tough. Show me something to help me out. Give me somebody to talk to that can help ease this burden. And He will. He's faithful. He will never leave us in a spot where we can't be. So as I wrap up, make sure we're prepared for what's coming. Don't just do the lip service of I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready for God to listen. Before Jesus comes back and parts the sky, things are going to get tougher. Be able to withstand those tough days. Be able to tell those loved ones that are around you. Let them see the works of your faith. Let them see that and know that when things get tough, to come to you. The things are a little bit different. I've had people look at me and say, I know you go to church and you believe in all that, but yeah, I believe in that. You probably ought to too. But that's their way of trying to ask questions about it without coming straight out and committing. People will dance all the way around before they commit. Because they knew once they commit, it's going to change it. People oftentimes ask, and we talk about, and everybody, listen, I don't know anybody that wouldn't want to taste, that tastes what we have as Christians and truly believe it, that want to go back to the way of the world. The joy, the happiness, presence of God falling on you, there's nothing that could replace it. Nothing. It'll make you think all the things that were important to you, all the things that you would drop everything and go and do, they will take second place. You will start doing those things for other reasons. You will start doing those things to be able to tell people that won't step foot in this church about God. We were talking this morning. I'll give you this testimony and I'm done. We were talking this morning about how God can go and he'll do miraculous things that pass understanding to unbelievers, but to believers, everybody understands that. So last week we had hay down up here at Sharon's, and I know Sister Sharon has prayed over that land. I don't know how many times. Sharon Walters, right? Walters last name, yeah. Sharon Walters up here right before you get to the bridge on 47. We had a bunch of hay down, and we were going to bail it on Friday, and it was Thursday evening, and Grandpa had got Wednesday evening there was a big rain that happened at Grandpa's, but he got in the truck and him and Judy drove down and they got close to Sharon's, and right before they got to Sharon's, you go around that turn, all right, and there's a cemetery up on the right if you're going towards Parkersburg. Right at that point, there was no rain. There was no rain from there until those fields. There was no rain on that field because if it would have rained then, it would have prolonged the situation. We may have lost hay. It would have been a major inconvenience. But we pray over our equipment. We pray over those things. And Grandpa and Judy had prayed that God would give us one more day to get that hay up. And it did not rain for that quarter-mile stretch right there past Sharon's. That hay never got wet. And I thank God for that. And that's it's one of those things people say, well, why don't you just bail it on Sunday so you don't have to worry about the rain? Listen, we do things the way we do, and we honor God's Sabbath day because that's what we're called to do. We're told to rest on Sunday. We don't work on Sunday. So whenever we do that, He then in turn will return the favor. He never goes and says, here's something void. No, He says, I'm going to because you honored me, I'm gonna make sure you're okay. And he kept that hay dry, and I thank God for that because we got it up that Friday, all of it. We got to a major hill, and this is where I'm gonna wrap up. There's a hill there that, my goodness, I wouldn't take my tractor on any day of the week until like 2 weeks ago on Thursday, I guess. But we got there, and Grandpa said he told me originally that he didn't cut. And I was like, thank God, I don't have to worry.
Yeah, he did.
I got there and I said, Grandpa, that's cut and raked. I said, well, are we baling that? And he's like, oh yeah, it's ready. And I'm like, I see that it's ready. I said, who's baling it? He said, well, if you don't want to, I will. And I'm like, Pap, I ain't putting you in that tractor up there on that. I said, I'll just do it, okay? I'll just take care. And then as we started up through there, I'll tell you what, there ain't much of a tractor seat left. But I made it up that hill, and I prayed the whole time. I said, God, you get me up this hill, you get me off this hill. You get me up this hill, that's all I could say because I was that scared. But there was a peace about me. I was worried, but a peace came over me that said, we're going to do. I got every bit of it, thankfully. But I thought, at that moment, I said, I can't. I looked at that hill and I said, I ain't doing it. And as I baled every other field around it, and I looked over at it, and I knew that it was waiting on me, and I finally ran out of hay rows to bale. I said, all right, guys, we're going to try it. And Grandpa said, I'll be right behind you to push you up it. And I'm like, okay. Like, I appreciated the sentiment, but I'm like, that ain't a whole lot of comfort. But we got it done. Listen, there's going to be obstacles. There's going to be big things that come up. Just like Abraham had to lay Isaac down.
Yes.
Attack it. And know that God's on your side. When you got him in your back corner, you ain't going to lose. You might learn something in a different fashion than you thought you should, but you're not going to lose. The enemy's never going to overcome against you. No fear, no anxiety, no stress, no nothing can overcome the blood of Christ. And I thank you for that. But that's all I got this evening. If anybody wants to come and pray, come and pray. But just stay ready and be in stride with him. Trust him. Truly trust him in this time that we live in.
Glory to God.